Now let's go over some noun paradigms that are built off of the regular noun paradigms that you already learned, but they involve some form of specialization. So you've already been introduced to one special feminine declension noun, and that's the epsilon, iota, rho verbs. Remember that any noun feminine noun whose stem ends in epsilon, iota, rho letter, so it could be a noun like hemera, which means day, or here, hora, which means hour, or hamartia, which means sin. If it ends in a rho, an iota, or an epsilon, it doesn't use the eta vowels. It uses instead the alpha vowels for the singular forms. And so you've already learned hora, horan, horai, horas for the epsilon, iota, rho verbs, rho nouns. Now let's learn the genitive form. And so the genitive form for singular, so if I wanted to say of an hour, I would write horas. So it wouldn't be horace with an eta. It would be horas with an alpha. If I wanted to say to an hour, I would say hora, but with an iota subscript. You absolutely have to have that iota subscript. The only way to tell the difference between the nominative singular and the dative singular here is that one has iota subscript, the dative, and the nominative does not. How do I say of hours? It would be horon, so it has the same plural ending, ron. And how do I say 2 hours? 2 hours. It would be rice. So it has the same plural ending, ice. So those are the forms for feminine nouns whose stem ends in either an epsilon, iota, or rho. There's also another special feminine noun that you haven't come across yet, and this one's a little tricky. These are nouns whose stem ends with an S-sounding letter, So we actually have a special name for it. We call this sibilants. So the nouns whose stem ends with an S-sounding letter, that is called a sibilant noun, and it's going to also have its special forms in the genitive and dative singular. So doxa is a good example. Doxa. So here's the stem dox. A is the case ending with vowel, and doxa means glory. And because it has an S sounding letter at the end, ks, ks, for kasi, what happens in the genitive and dative is it actually switches its stem vowel, or the case vowel. So if I want to say, so if doxa is glory as a subject of the sentence, then how do I say of glory? Well, that's doxase. Did you see that? It actually switches from the alpha to the eta, and the dative also uses the eta, so it's doxe, so that's to glory. But if I want to use glory as a direct object, it goes back to the alpha. Do you see that? Then the plural forms are what we expect. The plural forms remain the same in the feminine noun. So this would be doxai, then doxon, doxais, and then doxos. The last special noun is probably more irregular than the other two. It is a masculine noun that uses the feminine endings, and there's very few words that do this, but you almost always be able to spot it because of the unusual nominative singular case. Look at that, prophetes. Do you see that? That's not something we would expect. This is the word for prophet. And this is, if I were to parse this is a nominative masculine singular form, prophetes, even though it uses endings that look like they're from the feminine declension or first declension nouns. So notice how all the forms of prophetes use what we would expect to be feminine declension endings. So it does use the feminine endings, but technically prophetes is masculine. If I were to parse it, you would write it as a masculine noun, but it uses the feminine endings. So for the dative, it's a. For the accusative, it's ain. For the nominative plural, it's I. For the genitive plural, it's own. For the dative plural, it's ice. And for the accusative plural, it's os. And the genitive singular, so watch this. This form is prophetu. Ooh, look at that. Only in the genitive singular does the masculine genitive ending pop up. And with that, those are the special forms. There's also one special word that you need to know, and that's the name for Jesus. We should all know Jesus' name. So here's Jesus, Jesus. Now, it has its own unique paradigm because Jesus is technically not a translation, but we call it transliteration. When you don't translate the word, but you phonetically sound out the word of another language. So Jesus is the closest Greek phonetic equivalent to the Aramaic word Yeshua. So the way they say Yeshua in Greek is Jesus. So that's E-A-sus. But if you say the iota and the eta really fast, it sounds like Jesus. Jesus. The genitive is Yesu. Notice the dative also has the same form as the genitive, Yesu, and the accusative form is Yesun. You don't have plural forms because there's only one Jesus, but notice that the genitive and dative forms share the same case ending. So how do I know if I'm seeing the genitive or dative? It's context. So let's say Jesus' paradigm. Jesus, Yesu, Yesu, Yesun. This last part is actually just a helpful exercise. It's not really a new lesson. It's kind of a summary. If you were to see the endings of a noun, hopefully by now you'll be able to identify all the possible parsing elements to a given ending. From the endings number 11 on, this is all new material that you've learned for this module 3. And so what I want you to do is I want you to work through this. You do this on their own. I won't do all of it, but I'll just do a sample. But hopefully, when you see oo now, you automatically think, well, it can be a genitive singular masculine, or it can be a genitive singular neuter. And so you fill this out. When you see ace, hopefully you'll see that, oh, that's a genitive singular feminine ending, and so on. So do it for o, do it for a, do it for a, do it for own, do it for ois, do it for ice. And lastly, let's cover the definite article. We have already learned the nominative and accusative singular, the nominative plural, and the accusative plural forms for the definite article, rendered in English as the. And now we need to learn how to write the word the when it modifies a genitive or dative singular and plural nouns. The simplest way to remember how to write a definite article is to write out the case endings first. So the case endings for the genitive singular is u, and dative singular is o, and the case ending is own in the plural, and ois. So I'm going to do it all for all the forms. For the feminine, it's ace, a iota subscript, own, and ice. And then for the neuter, it's oo, o iota subscript, own, ois. All you have to do for these case endings that we use on nouns is add a tau to it. So the genitive dative article is to, the dative singular genitive article is to, genitive plural is tone, and tois for the masculine forms. It's tace, te, tone, tice for the feminine forms. It's to, tone, tois for the neuter forms. And with this, you now have all the forms of the article for each of the cases: nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative, singular and plural. And that completes our lesson.